weird, so upside down. Oh my god, Jesus. Why? It's just a necklace. So what's that? Or you leave this. Or
Good morning, bom dia. The party was that hard. I didn't thought we had that many beers because I know that guy. So, good morning, and without any further ado, Marc Obrador. Rounds of applause, please.
Can you hear me? Yeah. So thank you very much for coming here that early in the morning. I was actually not expecting that many people. So yeah, thank you very much for coming by to listen to me talk about Android application security. No, it's not working. Okay, now it is. So my name is Marc. I am the head of product architecture at Build 38. In Build 38, what we do is we develop mobile security solutions for Android and iOS. So you developers can focus on building your applications without having to worry about security, and can instead focus on building amazing experiences for your end users. And we take care of the security. As you can see, I'm based in Barcelona, and here you also have my Twitter and LinkedIn handles. I have to say I'm not very active, but anyway, if you want to contact me after the talk or whatever, you can reach me, okay? So today I'm going to be splitting the talk in kind of two big sections. I'm going to start with the more theoretical part. It's what I call introduction, for lack of a better name. And then I'm going to be talking about some of the most common threats of Android application security and what you can do to prevent them or to protect your applications against them. And of course, I'm going to finish with a short recap of the main takeaways that I would like you to take home. So let's get started. The first thing I want to discuss is why would you need to care about mobile application security? So as you probably know, we live in a mobile-first world. It's estimated that by the end of next year, half of the user interactions with your services are going to happen through the mobile channel. And unfortunately, we at P3K consider that the smartphone is what we call an untrusted device. And why do we say that? We cannot assess, or we just don't know where is our application code going to run. It may be running in a device which is up to date, but it may be running in a device that has not the latest OS version, so it may have some security vulnerabilities from the OS side, from the kernel side. It is even possible that your application is running on a device which is managed and handled by a hacker, which is trying to do harm to your application. So at the end, what we say is, we just don't know, so we have to assume that the place where our application is going to run is just untrusted, and we need to build some sort of security measures to prevent that. And last but not least, depending on the sector that you might be in, so for example, if you're in the financial industry, the healthcare sector, even the automotive sector, you may be subject to regulations to be able to perform business in these environments. So you have some regulation. There are going to be some certifications that are going to come together with the regulation, and in order to pass these certifications, usually they all involve some sort of security audit of your application. So that might be another reason to care about mobile application security. Next question is, okay, so what do I need to protect? Unfortunately, I don't have an answer for that. I think it's working. The answer is it depends. It depends on your business, it depends on your application, and I don't have the answer for you. So you will need to analyze your application, understand what is important for you, for your business, for your users, and then you can decide what needs protection for your site. What I can say is that normally the things to be protected fall under one of these three categories. The obvious one is user data. So you don't want to be leaking user password, you don't want to be leaking bank account credentials, you don't want to be leaking any kind of sensitive data for the user. So yeah. The second one is your intellectual property. And when I talk about intellectual property, I don't want you to think about super complex algorithms or patents or these kind of things, which of course need protection. But you have to consider that your application is your IP. Your application is something that is out in the field and someone can take it, can modify it, can use it for its own purpose. So the application itself is something that is worth protection because if it's compromised, it can have a negative impact on your business. And the third point is, of course, digital rights management. If you're Netflix and you're streaming things or you're streaming your content to mobile devices, you don't want this content to be unprotected because then someone would be able to just redistribute it, make profit, and then your business model would be gone. Last part of the introduction is actually which are the ways that you can do, or which are the things that you can do to protect your application. And before I can answer this, I want to switch the perspective. We are not app developers anymore. We are a hacker. And when I talk about hackers throughout this talk, I don't want you to be thinking of a nerd in his bedroom doing something for fun. We have to consider hackers as criminal organizations that operate on a profit basis. They operate to generate revenue. And this is how an ideal attack would look like for our hacker. So the red lines indicate an investment, some effort that the hacker needs to do to hack our application and to reverse engineer it and to develop an exploit that is going to generate money for him. And the green bars are income, however you want to measure it. It can be economical or in form of data that can be then sold. And we see that on the long run, there is a cumulative profit which is extremely positive. So this is what a hacker is aiming for. He's aiming to do some investment at the beginning and then be able to just deploy this hack and ideally deploy the hack once and deploy it to all the users and infect thousands of users. So back to our original question, how can I protect my application? The idea is that we want to make it unattractive from the economical perspective for the hacker. So instead of something like this, we want to have something, or we want to make something like that. As you can see, at the end, the hacker is actually losing money. So then if we achieve this, hopefully the hacker is going to go away and maybe try to hack someone else, but leave us alone. So how do we do this? The first thing that we did is we increased these red lines at the beginning, we make them bigger. We achieve this by using obfuscation and anti-reversing techniques. We want to make our application much harder for an attacker to understand and to reverse engineer, so the initial effort to develop a hack is going to be much bigger. The second thing is that if you realize these green bars here are not going as high as they were going before. As I said, the ideal scenario is that they develop the hack once and deploy it to thousands of users. So with diversification, what we do is we make the hacks being useful for a limited number of users. Ideally, what we would like to achieve is that the hack would only infect one user and no more. And the developer would need to, or the hacker would need to develop a hack for every user. Means of doing this means having different encryption keys for every application in the field, or having different tokens, or whatever might be useful for the attacker to use as a basis for a hack, that it's different among all applications. Finally, the third thing we can do is what we call renewability, which makes the attacker, forces the attacker to make a periodic investment. So it's not like I do the hack at the beginning, I deploy it, and I get income. Every now and then, the hacker needs to be getting the application, taking a look into it, and modifying the hack somehow to make it still work. Some ways to do that is, for example, changing the obfuscation every time we deploy the application, having, for example, the tokens that we distribute or the cryptographic keys that we distribute, having them have short expiration dates, and then if we can change them like on the fly via our backend or whatever, like changing them every 2 weeks or something like that, and then what this forces is that the hacker will need to be continuously working to keep the hack working. So if we achieve this, as I said, probably a hacker would say, it's not worth it, let's look somewhere else because these guys are protected and I'm not going to make any money here. So enough introduction, let's go a bit into more technical stuff. I'm going to be talking about some of the most common threats and some ways that you can easily implement to protect your application against them. First one is, of course, insecure networking. It's also called a man-in-the-middle attack, and it's something like that. It's basically someone which is capable of eavesdropping your communication between your application and your backend. And this is kind of the basis of everything. If the communication between your app and your backend is not protected, then it's game over from the security perspective. You can do whatever you want, just forget it and assume that the application is not secure. Luckily, we have HTTPS, so in 2019 there is no excuse for not using the HTTPS. If you have any kind of third-party provider that has some sort of excuse for using an HTTP or whatever, consider switching providers because it's really so widely deployed that it's kind of the basis for any security operation. However, it may happen that HTTPS might not be enough, particularly in Android. So the way in which HTTPS works is that when the client connects to the backend is presenting a certificate, and this certificate is signed by what is called the certification authority. And then the client receives the certificate and checks whether the certificate is valid. And this part of these checks involve verifying who issued the certificate, the certification authority. Android devices have a list of certification authorities pre-installed that come with the OS itself. And if the issuing certification authority is in the trusted list of trusted certification authorities, then the client accepts the connection and proceeds in sending data. You can search. You can look up this list of trusted certification authorities. It's in the settings of your phone. But unfortunately, certain OEMs have a too long list of trusted certification authorities. I'm not going to be naming anybody, but you can do your best. And if you look in there, you're going to see that there are some certification authorities that let's say that they don't provide you confidence. Some of them are even using algorithms that are nowadays considered to be weak, like RSA-124. And the problem for you, for your client using HTTPS and this trusted list of certification authorities, is that the hacker needs to compromise only one of them. If only one of them is compromised, which is something that is reasonable to think that may happen, then a potential hacker would be able to create a certificate for himself, saying that it's your backend, and then your mobile application would be accepting this connection. And then the flow of communication would be something like that. So the communication would be encrypted between here and here, hacker would decrypt it, forward to your server, and act as a proxy, seeing all the communication. What can we do to prevent that? This is where certificate pinning comes when we use certificate pinning, instead of relying on the trusted list of trusted certification authorities that comes with the OS, we bundle the certificate of our backend into the application, and we only accept connections that come from the server that has this specific certificate, and not any certificate taken by any of the trusted certification authorities. So how can we do that? In order to enforce HTTPS, luckily Android is enforcing it for a couple of versions now. But anyway, if you are targeting API 27 or lower, then you have this network security config option where you can disable clear text traffic for certain domains. And it would be good that you do this. And when it comes to certificate pinning, it's done in the same way through the network security config dialog. So what you see is that the domain to which you want to pin the certificates, and here are the SHA-256 digests of the certificates that are expected. So I say that you should only have one, and here we can see that there are two. It's normally a good idea to include a backup certificate, because if for whatever reason your certificate is compromised and you need to change it, then the application that you have on the field wouldn't be accepting the new certificate. So you pin a backup certificate to make sure that in case of disaster, you have a backup plan. And the same happens with the expiry date. Certificates expire at some point in time, so when this date is approaching, it's good that you push an update with the certificates that are going to be used after the expiration date. So you would add another pin set entry below this one with the new expiration date, and after the time comes, the phone would be using the new certificate. Okay, next topic. Next topic is application tampering and repackaging. But what is this? When we talk about app repackaging, what we have in mind is that an application is downloading our APK, unpacking it, modifying it for whatever purpose, repackaging, and distributing it. So through some kind of social engineering attack, like phishing or whatever, and tricking the user into installing what looks like your application, but it's actually a modified version of it. Why would someone do that? There are some trivial reasons, like disabling the checks for premium features. So if your application has a paid-for feature, then someone would decompile it, remove the checks, and get the paid features for free. There's a funny one, which happened a couple of years ago with Pokemon Go, which was quite popular. Basically, someone distributed a version of the app that had the location checks disabled, and you were able to capture Pokemon regardless of your location without being close to it. But anyway, the most common reason to do this is for stealing user data. So the typical scenario is that someone decompiles the application. In the login screen, they add a short snippet of code that is actually sending the data that the user is entering to a hacker's backend. So the application keeps working as normal, but every time a user logs in, the hacker is actually collecting their username and password. So that's something, kind of worrisome. So you may be wondering whether this is easy to do or not, and I have prepared a video that shows how this works. So what you see here is that I'm installing a simple Hello World application in the emulator. There we go. And then using APK tool. APK tool is a free tool that is available on the internet. It's open source, I believe. I can just decompile it, and we see that here it's a new folder appeared, and we start to see the contents of the APK. So we see the manifest, we see the main activity there. We can also see all the resources of the application when they load. There we go. And we also have the smiley code. So let's look for the activity that we saw in the manifest. This is the smiley code. This is decompiled, the decompiled text. It's not Java, it's not Kotlin, but as you can see, it's not that difficult to understand. So we have the onCreate method. Here we have the hello world string that we just changed to hello Lisbon. So we save it, and using APK tool again, we package it. So here I'm installing the application from the emulator. And when this process finishes, I'm going to still need to sign the application because APK tool returns an unsigned APK. But after that, I'm going to be able to install it. Okay, here we have the unsigned APK. With APK signer, we can sign it. Yeah, and there we go. Here we have our modified application saying hello Lisbon instead of hello world. So of course, if a hacker tries to do something similar to your application, it's not going to be as simple as that. I just change a string, that's something trivial. But anyway, I think we can all agree that modifying this modified code is not something that is super tricky, and the hack, as I said, like inserting a snippet of code that sends data to the backend, it's from the technical side, it's just a couple of hours. Then you have the trouble to getting people to actually install it. But from the technical side, it's not that much. What can we do to prevent against this kind of attacks? First thing that comes to mind, I've mentioned it before already, it's obfuscation. So here, probably you cannot see it, but anyway, what I'm, just for the size of it, you can infer it. These functions actually are doing the same. So if we can make our code look something like that, the hacker is going to have a much harder time trying to understand what is the right place to insert the malicious code. The second thing that we can do is try to detect when the application has been repackaged. And an easy way to do so is by the means of the signing certificate. So you as app developers, when you upload the application to the Play Store, you need to sign the application with a key that is only available to you. And then the application has the certificate associated to this key embedded into the APK. So what you can do is you can embed the digest of the certificate into your code, hidden somehow. And then you can, at runtime, retrieve it and see if that they match. If they match, it's been signed by you, but if they don't match, then it means that somebody else signed, and then you can probably take some sort of action. Like, for example, denying the application denying the application from running. Of course, if the hacker is able to decompile and repackage your application, he is going to be able to remove this piece of code. So what do we do? There are mainly two approaches to that. One would be that instead of doing this check locally, you do it in your backend. So the hacker is not able to modify the code that's running on your backend. And if for some reason that's not possible and you need to run it on the device, my recommendation would be that you implement these kind of checks in native C or C++. Because native C or C++ is compiled down to assembly code, it's much more difficult to reverse engineer and to modify. And then of course the hacker is going to have a much harder time in trying to reverse it. Okay, and down to the last attack. I know that you all know root and rooted devices. Probably some of you even have rooted devices on your pockets. But do we really know what a rooted device means, and in particular what's the impact that it has on security? As you know, Android is a Unix system, and as a Unix system, it's based on users, groups, and file system permissions. On top of that comes what is called the Android sandbox model. You've probably all heard of it. The sandbox model means that each application runs in isolation from one another. They have their own process IDs, and one process cannot see each other. And the same happens when it comes to storage, that each application has its own directory for data, and an application cannot access another application's directory. And this is what we see here. This is the data directory of an emulator. And as you can see, you have an entry for each, a directory for each application that is installed in the emulator. And what we see here is that each directory has a different user and different group. They are owned by actually different users of the system. And what is more, in the permissions side, we see that the owner of the directory has all permissions on it, and all other users are denied any kind of access to these directories. So that is the sandbox model when it comes to data directories. When we get root in a device, what we do is we become what we call the super user in a Linux system, which is a user that has power over everything. So super user can actually modify its permissions, can modify the owners of this. It's actually like becoming God in the Android system. So you can imagine that this from security perspective is bad, because if a piece of malware can execute code as root, then he's going to be able to read all the data in all of these directories. So if you have something that is critical for your application, like user data or whatever in these directories, malware running as root is going to be able to read it. So you may want to be detecting root, and there are some good libraries for root detection. You can find some implementations in GitHub. Particularly, Scott Alexander Brown has an interesting one, which has been, I think, widely used. And also, for some time now, Google is also providing some sort of root detection through the safety and attestation API. So you may want to take a look into this in case it's useful for you. Problem, of course, is the same as before. If you implement it in Java, it's relatively easy to reverse engineer and to remove this kind of checks. But the big question for me is, what do you do if you detect that you are running on unrooted devices? And this is the tricky part. As you know, some users will have had its device rooted for legitimate purposes, because they want to change some settings that are not possible in a stock ROM, or for whatever reason. So you probably don't want to deny service to these users. We do have a customer that denies running on rooted devices, but that's something that's rather uncommon. In general, you don't want to deny service to users because they have rooted devices, because any user counts, and what we are focused is in getting more users, no less users. Unfortunately, there are other types of roots, the ones that are not actually done by the users, but that are remote exploits. And this is the thing. It's forgive me for using an iOS news here, but it's so recent. I'm not sure if you can see it, but it's August 13th. It's 2 weeks ago. So by the end of August, there was Ian Beer, Google researcher at Google Project Zero, which unveiled that for years, there have been certain websites in the wild that only by visiting them using an iPhone, they would install a jailbreak exploit. And jailbreak is the same as root, just it's a different name on the iOS world, but the idea is the same, is getting root user to escape the sandbox. So only by visiting certain websites using the iPhone, a jailbreak exploit would run on your device and would install a piece of malware that would connect to a command and control server, and this command and control server would be giving instructions to the piece of malware, harvesting all kinds of user data such as messages, pictures, emails, and so on and so forth, and sending them to the backend. This, as I said, it's 2 weeks ago and has been running for years on iPhone. This has hit the news because it's quite big. So what do? We have users that may have willingly rooted the device, and we have users that may not even know that the device is rooted, because this exploit that we were talking about, the one in the iPhones, was completely transparent for users. They wouldn't see a thing. Their device would keep running as normal, and all their data was being installed in the background. So what can we do? Unfortunately, I don't have an answer that is going to fit all of you, but there are some ideas that we usually give our customers. An idea would be that you can restrict the sensitive functionality. For example, let's say if you have a banking application, you may want to limit the amount of money that you can send transactions. So, for example, if you are running on a device whose integrity has not been compromised, you can allow any kind of value. And if you are running on a rooted device, then maybe you limit it to, I don't know, 50 euros, something like that. It's going to depend on your use case. It may be a solution for you, it may not. And another solution is, it's exactly what we do at Build 38, is We design our security model assuming that truth will happen. And then we build our protections assuming that the device is rooted and that we have to protect against this. This is in contrast to the Android and the iOS perspectives that the integrity of the system is okay and that truth will not happen. Because when you get root on an Android or an iOS device, most of the security features, not only the sandbox, but other kinds of security measures are gone. So what you can do is you can build your security model that's assuming that this is going to happen. Okay, so that would be it. Let me just recap a bit what we discussed to make sure that we all go away with common understanding. The first thing that I would like you to take away from this talk is that you are the ones that know your business, you are the ones that know your application and your users. So you are the ones that are most entitled to decide what needs protection and what doesn't need protection. The second thing is that you don't have to aim for 100% protection. Everything is capable. If you can do the best that you can, but if NSA comes in and decides that they want to hack your application, they are going to do it no matter what you do. So again, it's your application, you know how critical it is security for you, so aim for something that is good enough for your business model. We said it, secure networking is a must. Use HTTPS, if possible with certificate pinning. Next one is, as you saw, the Smalley code is super easy to understand, so Java and Kotlin and in general JVM-based languages are super easy to reverse engineer. So if you have security sensitive code in your applications, either move it to the backend or implement it in C or C++, because then if you move it to the backend, there's no way to reverse engineer it. If you move it to C or C++, you are making it much more difficult for the attacker. And finally, as I said, root can be a pain in the ass. My suggestion is that you come up with a plan. You know the implications that root has, and you need to come up with a plan. Either it's okay to say, I accept rooted devices and I don't care. It's also okay to say, I don't accept rooted devices and I'm going to deny services, or whatever in between. But my suggestion to you is that you have a plan for when your application is running on rooted devices. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Questions?
Thank you for the talk. I have one question about the security pinning. It's what if, so you have an expiration date for every set of pins. What if the user never updates after that date your app? Then the app is unusable, or?
No. If the user does not update and the certificate that you are using at the moment is not the one that is pinned, then the connection is going to, the application is going to reject the application. But normally certificates have relatively long lifetimes, like of several years. So yeah, probably if you have a user that hasn't updated for some years, you have bigger boulders than certificate pinning.
Please.
Hey, so in the beginning you mentioned that one of the ways we can worsen the initial investment of the hacker was to periodically change the obfuscation of the code. Could you just elaborate a bit on that? Is that something that we can do with ProGuard, or do we need another different tool?
Okay, yeah, ProGuard is one of our competitors. I'm going to try to be politically correct here. But ProGuard is method renaming. It's not obfuscation. That's why they are offering the DexGuard, which is the paid-for alternative. I mean, it's a very good move in terms of marketing on their side. That ProGuard is bundled in Android Studio, and everybody knows it. But when you want to have real obfuscation, they suggest you to move to DexGuard, which is actually obfuscating not on the source code level, but on the bytecode level. ProCard is basically just changing the method names. That's when we talk about obfuscation, it's something more like actually changing the method code to insert like bogus if statements or some sort of control flow flattening where you don't see when you decompile the code there is no logic structure, but it's, for example, something like a for with a lot of switch statements in between. This is what we have when we talk about obfuscation. So what we do, we have our own in-house compiler for obfuscation, and what we do is with every release of our products, we change or for every build of our products, we change the obfuscation seed. So each customer has a different obfuscation seed, which means that even if the source code that is compiled is the same, the resulting assembly is completely different. And this happens for every customer, and the same happens for when we provide updates to our customers. That it's the same source code, but on the assembly level, it looks completely different.
Did someone have a question there?
But to say that,
Yeah,
there's a quick. You want to make it run around.
Not sure.
Thanks for your talk. So, you say about certification. How do you see the signing certificate being used when you update to app bundles? Now it's Google job to sign your application. So will this change the piece of code you show to?
I have never used the signing functionalities from Google, so I may be wrong, but I think that is you, the developer, that is providing your signing certificate and key to Google. So as long as you know it, you can bundle it in your source code. And as long as Google is using the key that you provided and then the certificate that you provided, there should be no issue.
And we have time for one last question. Okay.
Thanks for talk. Related to the obfuscation that you said that in a bytecode level it adds some for and if statements, doesn't it hurt somehow performance, or these if and fors are in such kind of way that are never going to be executed?
Yes, certainly. So obfuscation has a price, and hence it cannot be applied like in all the methods and in all your source code bases. Normally in our experience, the security relevant parts of the application are relatively few of them and do not execute in the normal flow. Maybe they just execute once when the application is launching or once when there's a transaction going. And these are the parts of the code that we want to obfuscate. We have to pay a price. It will be a bit on app size, but it's not going to be relevant. But in performance, it can be. So what we do is that we limit the places where obfuscation is applied, and we only apply it in a randomized basis, and only like with percentage of 10 to 15% time of the times and of the words that could actually be applied, because otherwise the performance is too bad.
So thank you so much, Marc.
Thank you.
So this is thank you for the session. Hands of applause, please, and we will let you go.
Thank you very much.